I'm worried that liking this movie makes you a bad person, and I really like this movie.
Oh, he's got notes. John's got notes. Go first then, dude. You got the notes.
I like this movie. It's fucked up and definitely antisocial, and I really liked it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, John, go ahead.
Is the consensus though that most people liked it?
I'm a better person having seen it. There's some issues.
This was the third time I've seen this movie, and it just gets better.
I could see this movie multiple times, I think.
Like I'll let you go, John, but I'll say one thing. When we talk about movie villains, this kid should come up way more often.
Yeah.
But no, let's do it.
This is one of the freakiest performance. Like, oh god.
No, let's touch on this later, because the question of actually if he's a villain or not is a question in this.
Yes. Okay. Whether he's a villain or not. Whether he's a villain or not is a question, but I'm just saying his performance. Like if you look at it objectively, from like when the way he just hangs his head out, his mouth out. Yeah, I just like he's so indifferent to the horribleness. Anyway, we'll talk about it.
All right, but John, you got the notes.
All right, you guys.
Here we go.
Notes, and then you guys are going to change my mind. It sounds like.
Here we go.
All right, here we go.
Hold on. You didn't like The Lobster because you thought it was mean, right?
The Lobster, yes.
Did you like?
Here, let him get through his manifesto at least once.
All right, here we go. There's a certain point in the first 15 minutes or so of any movie where you're deciding if you're going to buy into whatever the director is selling. In the case of The Killing of a Sacred Deer, I really wanted to, but I'm not a slut. I'm not going to suspend my disbelief for every Tom, Dick, and Yorgos that comes along with artsy cinematography and some A-list actors. Or if I do, I want to be shown a good time. And The Killing of a Sacred Deer is not a good time.
Yeah.
Sacred Deer has something in common with the previous week's Carnival of Souls, in that there's this lack of affect in all the characters. In most scenes, stilted dialogue is delivered with almost no inflection. But unlike Carnival, in Killing of a Sacred Deer, this is not a byproduct of amateurism, but instead a conscious choice. Lanthimos had to purposely write stilted dialogue and specifically instruct his cast of skilled actors to deliver it that way.
Yep.
The only emotion any of them is allowed to convincingly express, occasionally, is rage. All this does lend a weird disconnect and eeriness to the whole affair, but I'm trying to suss what it is we're supposed to take away from it. Is it that this surgeon's family is already damned before the events of the movie even play out by virtue of being white and well-to-do and thus bloodless and less than human? But every character in the movie is like this, including the villain, who is also white and who also lives in a slightly smaller, slightly not as nice house, which is still way bigger than my house. Shrug emoji. Sacred Deer is basically a horror movie because the character of Martin is taking revenge on this family through supernatural means. But Lanthimos pushes the artifice and everything so hard that I couldn't care about any of it. In that way, Sacred Deer has a lot in common with his previous film, The Lobster, and his follow-up, The Favorite, heightened artificiality and far-fetched circumstances specifically designed to allow Lanthimos to torture his characters. It's his recipe for depicting cruelty. For me, this recipe works better when it's exploited for overt comedy. That's why I liked The Favorite much more than this film, and dislike The Lobster only a little less than this film.
I see where you're coming from, but I just don't agree with. I mean, you're not saying everything you said is true, but I disagree.
Lobster and
would you argue that Wes Anderson does the same thing to his A-list actors in every movie?
Yes, he does. He does it with a different effect because Wes Anderson also creates his own surreal world, but manages to get real emotion from it. And that's exactly what Yorgos does. Yorgos makes a fictional, surreal world, but yet the stories and the emotion or the sort of like the tales and the experiences are real.
I think John.
What emotion am I supposed to get from all this? I was appalled at the violence of it. I wasn't entertained exactly. I mean, I wasn't enlightened in any way. I certainly wasn't. It wasn't comedy to me.
There's some dark comedy in there.
I disagree. I disagree that it's not a comedy. I don't think it's an intentional comedy. But by about a third of the way through the movie, I couldn't fucking stop laughing at the acting. Like I just could. It took me completely out of the movie.
I warned you guys. I said he just goes deeper than the Lobster.
It's literally like it literally to me felt like a bunch of aliens were given Edgar suits from Men in Black, and they were doing their first table read of pretending to be human beings. like they hadn't even gotten to the point that they were actually on camera yet. Like they were literally doing a table read of humans.
No,
And
seriously.
the only thing they understood was rage, which is why my favorite part in the whole movie is the very end when he's spinning around with the gun, because it's the first time I feel like there's a human being in this movie, with the exception of Alicia Silverstone, who I think was excellent in this movie
By playing a normal person.
And I haven't heard anyone talk about at all the fact that she's in this and very good. Like
she's that thought till later.
Way.
I actually mentioned her, I think, in one of our episodes a while back, because she did this and then she had a very small part in a movie called The Lodge,
which I just watched.
And she is excellent.
Great.
No, I didn't like the film, but she made me cry in the first 10 minutes of The Lodge.
Wow.
She's so spectacular.
Yes.
As she is here. And I don't know, she just took like 20 years off and came back, and she is knocking it out of the park every time. Like she is amazing.
She was in Hamlet 2, which is a bad movie, but she's very good in it. And like I would like to see her do more things in general, because she's demonstrated that she's good in comedies and she's good in dramatic roles. Like I'm pretty impressed by that. And like I didn't even know she was in it, and all of a sudden I saw her and I was like, holy shit, that's Alicia Silverstone.
So can I share? I have a loose theory on the acting in this film.
Okay, but I'm going to follow up. But go ahead.
It's developing as we speak, but here we go.
Okay.
I actually think that Lanthimos is working on another level. I really do, and I argue that it's I argue that it's harder to do what he's doing than to try and make this realistic. And I think that if you sometimes, no matter maybe what level of filmmaker you are, if you're trying to do a story like this and make it realistic, you really, really run the risk of falling flat on your face, or making it overly dramatic, or making it cheesy, or making it just not work or feel. Yeah, but you feel disjointed. So instead he says, you know what, I'm going to invent my own plateau, and I'm going to have everyone exist there. In fact, Colin Farrell should win a fucking Academy Award, I think, for this performance, because he actually does go through huge ranges of emotion. They're just very, very subtle and nuanced, especially at the end of the film. And I think that the two leads, the young boy and Colin, are like, they're doing like world-class A performances, acting. Like the daughter is great as well. I think the weakest is probably the wife. Kidman just doesn't kind of get Yorgos's world. I think I probably would have recast her, but everyone else gets his world, is on board, and understands how they're supposed to speak, what they're supposed to say. And I know the complaints you guys are saying, but those are surface level complaints. You have to look deeper than that. And actually it's harder to do what they're doing. And I think they're absolutely killing it. And I think that it actually makes that detachment, makes it more freaky. It makes it for me, it hits me harder in the gut, and this movie blows me away every single time.
I'm with Jared on that one.
I think it's a story, and this is something that kind of washed over me as watching it. It's a family of robots. It's a dad robot, mom robot, and the kid robots dealing with an unexplainable phenomenon. And the robot family, you can see them going to go to 10 over and over and over again, because they can't process what's happening to them. And the robot family has to go through this thing. They go to the hospital and figure out what the robot problem is, get all the robot tests done. They never really break out of being robots. They're still stuck in this robotic mode. And you get Colin Farrell with his fantastically huge beard that hides his face and any hint of emotion to it. It adds the whole robotness to the whole thing. Now, I'm saying this is a bad thing. This was obviously the director's choice to have this robotic family. And I think there's a lot of families out in the real world who get to this point.
Yeah, this entire movie was on Xanax. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I get that. I get that, but that doesn't make it compelling to me. It makes it less compelling.
Well, anyway, the coming at the end where he goes in a circle and tries to shoot everybody, that you think about it, makes no logical sense. But it's a very robotic response to the problem.
It's consistent within the world is created, though. No, that is exactly what
he's setting up these arbitrary situations so that he can have these terrible things happen.
No,
That's
He's
Well, it's
coming,
also a
he's
it's
coming up to
also
a random. He's hitting a random unsolvable problem with a random unsolvable solution.
Did no one read that it's also a
Russian roulette.
it's actually a retelling of like a Greek myth, by the way. Did no one look that
No,
up?
I
No.
tell.
Yeah, I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but this is actually a retelling of like a Greek tragedy, like a myth
Yeah.
that exists. You could go read it. So this is sort of his interpretation of that.
Now this also ties in, and getting finished at the thought of this is the flip side of the devils, and I mentioned this earlier. There is a supernatural world that acts in a supernatural way, and this is how people who don't believe in the supernatural world would respond to this. And this is the opposite of the devils, because it's the things that film denies are absolutely real here. So much so that kid, the teenager, probably didn't even do it. This is the universe punishing.
Yeah, it's weird.
family.
It's like maybe he didn't do it, but he knows the rules and he's telling them.
Yeah, he knows the rules. He's telling them because he received that knowledge, but he does not necessarily. He didn't cast a spell. He didn't do anything.
But that's
He's the recipient of a supernatural justice.
But that's a lovely thing about this piece is that you don't know for sure.
That's true.
What I mean is you could argue either way. Is this kid making this happen, or is he just? I mean, when you think about it, right? This is karma. So.
Right.
The idea that, hey, you have to sacrifice one of your deers because you killed my father. Like, whether the kid's doing it or not, I think it's arguable that he's terrifying in a weird, like.
Oh, no argument. He does an amazing job in this film.
There's some scenes like when he's tied up in the basement. There's some scenes when he's eating the spaghetti. He's just horrifying.
Jim.
Yeah, he's just
that kid. Yes, the kid from Dunkirk, actually.
Yeah, the kid from Dunkirk.
From a lot of things, turns out.
He just the way he gives information out and the way he responds with before he says something that he doesn't have to take an for at all. It's amazing. I think it's amazing.
Well, his character showed a little more humanity and depth than the whole family put together, the robot family. And that made it interesting because I'm not, it's not put down. I'm just saying the family put themselves in this emotionless, stilled moment, like an unplucked string, and that's their comfort zone for everybody in the family. And then this thing comes along, and slowly trying to pluck that string. And I don't think Dad ever got there. I don't think he ever.
You might be right. It's probably also a comment on suburbia or like affluent. It's a comment like everyone's a Stepford wife in this.
Pretty much.
Something like.
I'm a big fan of a director that's going to go like Wes Anderson. There's probably others I can come think about. Like they've got a thing. And they're gonna Wes Anderson always gets called he makes diorama movies.
Yeah.
They're like this really artificial, everything's 0 point perspective, centered, etc. And people don't talk like this. And yes, he's got a thing where he actually manages to find the humanity and the real human emotion, but he's got a thing.
Yeah.
And this guy has definitely got a thing too. And it's like I said, it's just this weird intersection. Cronenberg, who at his most icy is also very robot-like. He'll watch Dead Ringers again or Crash.
Yeah, but Dead Ringers got a reaction out of me. I wanted to throw up when that movie was over.
Well, that movie's definitely a litmus test.
Same here. I was getting very ill towards the end.
I'm enthralled that I just feel like somebody is just they got a point of view and they're going to create this world and I'm either going to go with it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
And this guy, I love The Lobster. I love this, and I love The Favorite. I'm going to go back and watch the other 2 or 3.
I recommend. I'm
with John, and that we both hated The Lobster because it's like for me it was just clumsy sci-fi. I thought it was just like it was a sci-fi.
But it wasn't just sci-fi. It was also
but
it was
a very clumsy science fiction concept that did off the rails. I thought
we're the two pragmatic boors that aren't going to.
But it's
pretty much.
But the Lobster.
You're gonna throw out a premise like that. You got to back it up, and it did not back it up.
The Lobster is a love story too, though, and that's what I love it too. And I was fortunate enough to see Dogtooth before I saw any of them, and that was kind of his first big. Like I recommend Dogtooth. It's in Greek, and then I saw them in succession. But yeah, I'm with Chris, and Lanthimos's work just strikes a chord with me, and I'm a huge fan, and he hasn't failed me once.
It's weird and interesting.
Yeah. So what
Jim, we haven't heard from Jim yet.
Okay.
It's amazing that everybody mentioned Wes Anderson, whom I really like his flicks, but somewhere in the middle of this, I started thinking about Moonrise Kingdom.
Yeah.
Especially when the girl goes to choir and is singing. You have those kids' voices singing. The lack of affect didn't bother me as much as it does some people. I've known a lot of people like that who their idea of morality and control is just a lack of affect, I think. And it was interesting to see Colin Farrell in a part that was not like anything else I'd seen him in, really. The last thing I saw
The Lobster
was in Bruges. So
That's a great film.
Oh, that's very good.
A role that didn't acquire any Irish passion. Yes.
Well, he's got range. See, that's why Colin Farrell's a great actor. You can watch this and In Bruges, and you're like,
hey,
wow.
he's a misapplied actor. I'll give you that.
but I was also faintly reminded of the Dogma 95 flicks, like Melancholia or whatever. I guess that's post.
Oh, we got a discussion about Melancholia sometime.
Yeah, that's way post, but same filmmaker.
Is the same sort of feel to it, Yeah, I had a hard time, speaking of disbelief or suspension of disbelief, I had a hard time deciding whether it's supposed to be really happening or it's not really happening or it's all psychological, foo-for-ah. It's a little tough with the way the kid's character is written to know. Did anybody else get that feeling at all? Or
sure, I think you could argue that.
Literally to take it in that, is he poisoning this family?
I was like, there's that. I was waiting for him to shoot them or something.
Yeah, and then when it sort of made a transition where it's like, okay, it's not poison, it's the supernatural. And all he has to do is like stand outside the hospital and look in the window, and he can make happen or something.
Although that was interesting to me because that gave him agency all of a sudden. He was this kid who was just kind of talking bullshit most of the film. Like he knew what was going to happen. It was kind of like when a bad guy is doing something in the movie, if you talk to the henchmen, they know what's going on, but it's not them doing it.
Yeah.
He was like that henchman in a lot of ways. But in that parking lot scene at the window, he gets the girl to get up and go to the window, and all of a sudden maybe that fucker is in charge. I don't know. Maybe he is running this thing. It was. I can't tell if that was sloppy or it's on purpose. I'm not sure.
I don't think the movie knows. Like that's part of my problem.
You're absolutely right.
Is I don't think the movie knows, and if the movie doesn't know, then it doesn't matter.
That's again, I think all concocted so that he can, like in The Lobster, he can throw somebody out a window and have them bleed on the pavement. And he can have somebody get blinded in an operation intentionally.
No one's ever going to call this torture porn, but this is absolutely torture porn.
No.
You might as well be watching Hostel.
Right.
Like it's cruelty for cruelty's sake, and I don't find that to be particularly compelling in this case. There are times when I think it works. I just didn't feel it in this, and I think that might and again I think that might have something to do with the fact that no one in the movie seems to care what's happening. Like that's part of my problem with the robot. That's my problem with the robot thing. I don't want to watch robots have shit happen to them.
That's the quote.
Of course they care. First of all, comparing this to Hostel, fuck you. Second of all, I think they do care what's happening because that's why when they have no use of their legs, like the boy is like, Dad, I'm sorry. I cut my hair like you wanted, Dad. Isn't my hair look nice now, Dad? And when the daughter, he picks her out from the gravel and is washing her knees, and she's like, Dad, I love you. You're my favorite person in the whole world. They're trying to say like, don't kill me, kill the other fucking kid, dude. Like they do care,
I think it was all protection on their part.
Yeah, like
because Colin Farrell's the real.
Now, I want to run the table with a question here. Now, goes back to the question of justice. This is, again, both these films have a theme, which is the supernatural and justice.
Yep.
Now, in this film, do you think that
I would add they share a little bit of hubris.
Hubris is not a part of it. Hubris is another big part of this thing. That leads to a downfall. But do you think that Colin Farrell did the thing he did? Do you think that he deserves the punishment?
I think he did the thing he did, whether or not that's worth the death of his child.
Mm-hmm. That's the question.
Yeah,
it's a straight 1-for-1 if he did it. Dad for
like
kid for dad.
An airline pilot, and he got behind the controls of the 747, and he had 2 drinks. But he got the plane down.
Are we talking about a flight?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean,
Denzel Washington. First of all, that's a great film, and I recommend very highly watching it.
I like
No, that movie
guy
is a fucking. That movie is a goddamn AA fucking advertisement. It's a piece of shit.
Okay.
I liked it more than that, but okay.
Jesus Christ! At the end, they might as well have said like, "Go to sponsored by AA. Go to a meeting now, you fucking."
He didn't get away with it. He actually fessed at the end, which is interesting.
Dude, it was a Hallmark movie.
Okay. All right, moving on.
No, Hallmark movies have bigger budgets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and better writing.
So Colin Farrell was somewhat at fault because he had been drinking.
Yes.
It was. I thought that was a funny bit where he blamed the anesthesiologist, and the anesthesiologist.
That was interesting, wasn't it?
Definitely the anesthesiologist.
See, we need to ask a doctor and an anesthesiologist.
Yeah, maybe we need an expert opinion in here, is who actually killed him or not.
I thought all the stuff in all the scenes in the hospital rang true. I spent a lot of time in the hospital in ICU and stuff, and it's like those people are all robots because they don't want to have to engage with what
That makes sense.
Happening at their job every day.
Imagine a cardiologist would be kind of a robot because it's life and death every day, and you have to kind of disconnect, right?
They all smoke
That's
too,
a good point.
which is a realistic. It's a realistic thing. All cardiologists smoke.
Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like we're split.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Well,
I don't think Colin Farrell deserved what he got because he got that kid a really nice watch.
okay. All right. That's a nice watch. I'll give you
through
that.
the anesthesiologist.
What? It was
Yeah,
just
but you
three different scenes that was a very, very nice watch.
No,
But I-
it
but I
wasn't
have
as
to
nice.
change
Wasn't
the-
as nice a watch as the watch that he was going to buy because he wanted to get a new watch.
Also, who's
Because
getting a
still
weird?
doesn't
Who was getting a
replace
gay
his
vibe at the
father.
beginning of the film?
What?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
He's trying to set it up. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you don't.
But I want to tell you that I would rather have a leather band because I prefer a leather band on my watch to a metal band. I hope you don't mind that if I went and got a leather band.
I feel like
know,
I
it was
was
like-
watching the movie again.
And you see him, Colin Farrell is like thinking, "You stupid bastard! I give you a 10 grand watch.
I know.
Why don't you put a plastic?" You know,
But I think he
Oh, it's
just
very nice.
just not
It's very nice.
because,
I like it very much.
I don't think it was any kind of gay subcontext. He just got rid of him because the kid was taking up too much of his time. He was getting too personal,
Sure.
and that was it. He was just shoving back, and I don't know if that
I
caused.
kept
That's
waiting
somebody in
for
my
it.
life, and now they're going to be a problem.
The
Yeah.
first 45 minutes, I kept waiting for it to turn into happiness. You know, he's gonna like drug the kid and
Oh yeah, little Todd Salons action.
Yeah, well, you never know, you know.
We should do one of his movies. Oh my god.
Oh boy.
Okay. All right. Well,
Good picks.
hey,
Thanks,
Yeah,
Chris.
nicely
Excellent
done.
pick.
Knocked him down, man.
just to echo a little bit, I don't know who here ever saw Goodnight Mommy.
Don't know
Loved
that.
Like
it. Loved it.
Never saw it.
Yeah, it's a.
That's why I was disappointed in The Lodge because Goodnight Mommy is so fucking good, and The Lodge
Goodnight
is
Mommy
not
is
very
a
good.
really creepy as fuck horror movie from Austria, directed by this. I think they're a couple, right?
Yeah, it's like a duo.
Are there
Yeah,
no?
The Lodge was their English language follow up that had the Alicia Silverstone. It stars the woman from she's Elvis's granddaughter.
Is it Riley Keough?
Riley Keough, who was in a movie
Yeah.
I think John really likes, Americans.
And Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah, she was in that.
Yes,
American Honey. Yeah.
American Honey, and then it's what's his name? Who is Strider? I think in the Hobbit movies, Armitage.
I
And
was
there's,
I was really
Elvis-
disappointed in that one.
I liked
Elvis's
it a lot.
grandeur.
It is almost as fucked up as the movie we just talked about.
It's too, but see here. So okay, that's a great comparison. Then the thing about The Lodge, though, is it's trying to do realism, and it's so fucking bleak that you're just like, fuck this movie. It also there's some really like the father character never would have made the choices that he made. First of all, he wouldn't invite the woman to go with them in the first place, you know, with the kids there. Secondly, he would never have left them there with her mental instability and, you know, psychological you know, past.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
Like it's just you have to suspend your disbelief so fucking much in that, but they're also trying to play it real and it doesn't work. And I think that's an argument for The Lobster, where it's like they're not playing it for real. It's, you know, it's
Try to make it
this-
real.
it's the stylized thing. But also, like, Goodnight Mommy, I think is so good that this one was a big letdown for me, The Lodge.
You know what I was reminded of a bunch during watching both of these movies, and it has nothing to do with the content, but it has to do with, I think they were shot similarly. is Thomas Alfredson's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Oh,
Yeah,
Like
talking about that.
the incredibly stark way that both of these movies are shot, and a lot of the camera setups and things like that. And it just reminded me how much I love that movie, and I need to go back and watch it again.
I just watched it
Tinker
last
Tailor?
week.
Yeah, it's so good.
yeah.
Like that's one of the best paced movies I've ever seen. Like
Yeah, I
you
know.
could teach a class on pacing with that movie.
Well, A Sacred Deer is just like it's an examination of Midwestern industrial architecture, in a lot of ways.
And I love his
escalators and rooms, and everything was just laid out
I had
in
to
a
look it up.
corporate, cold way.
Can we talk about his like high angle camera, by the way?
Yeah,
So
that shot of the escalator.
The escalator,
Oh,
that
yeah.
was so neat.
No, but I mean on his tracking shots, or
Oh, yeah.
even just his still shot.
Oh no,
He
he's
puts
going
the
down a
camera
hallway. And the
way
camera's on the
up
ceiling.
high.
Yeah, I know, it's the damnedest thing you ever seen.
And it's so amazing, and he
It is.
tracks with it.
Yeah.
And you're like,
But dude, that guy is addicted to the slow setting on his zoom. Oh my god, so many shots. Over and over and over and over again. It was like that one shot cutter from The Exorcist for the entire movie. That's it.
There was another technique he did, because his wide shots are amazing, and he does these really interesting angles, like that shot that's behind Chris right now.
Yeah.
It's sort of Kubrickian, There's
This was, I was thinking, the space station at the beginning of 2000.
everybody's suspended in this sort of shadowless space. Yeah, they're like
Again, hospitals.
hospitals. But more subtly, I was noticing the angles at which he shot his actors in close-up. And there were some scenes that were like the more mundane. He wasn't really wowing us with, architecture or anything. He was just showing close-ups of the characters. It was in the diner, I think. And it was this 3/4 view of Colin Farrell, but he had the camera up just a little too high.
yeah,
You weren't on the eye line. You were never on the eye line with these guys in this conversation. So it was very much like, well, if you were, say, the waiter waiting at the side of the table, waiting for these people to finish talking, that would be the view you'd have of his head. It was like 3/4, and you've seen a lot of the top of his head.
Oh yeah.
And it really was the right choice given what he was trying to do with all the acting and stuff.
it's just off a little bit.
No, I pulled the shot earlier during the discussion. This one right here. Wait, if I can make it work. There's a very important scene after he got EKG and he's talking to the guy, and they're both almost off the screen.
Yeah.
That was just really it was arresting in some ways, but it's also just
There's a really good movie that does that by Antonio Campos called After School. I don't know if anyone's seen that.
Don't know that one.
But he does that, like he'll frame people almost like they'll be way down in the corner, like where my hand is, like almost out.
Yeah.
And all the action's going on right there.
Yeah.
And you're like, what the fuck is this? But it's like hypnotic almost, because you want to see. You're kind of like, dude, give me more of the.
I know.
Like, just move the camera a little bit.